Hello, everybody. Once you can confirm you can hear me, we will get this party started. I see there's already quite a bit of healthy chat going on. Yes, they can hear you. All right, everybody. Welcome to Jagged Alliance 3's dev stream number 9. I have a new guest today, the infamous, the famous Buyan with an I. How you doing, Buyan?
Hi, Brad. Excited to be here at last and kinda hyped up for the release. So,
Yeah, we were talking before the stream. You've been on this project for quite a while, so coming up
yeah,
to D-Day is really exciting.
yeah, it feels like the end of the really long journey, and I can say that it's been quite a ride. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's I still am I'm a little bit just it's always like this when you've been making games and you work on something for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, sometimes longer in this industry, and you're right there at the threshold, so to speak, of all of your work and love and passion coming out there. And yeah, you're never really sure how everyone's gonna react, but you know at least that you cared and you tried as best you can. So it's an exciting time for sure.
Yep.
Is there a is there a I'm guessing you can't talk about them spoiler wise or anything, but do you have a couple like things that you're looking to see if how people respond to when the game comes out? Like, are there particular topics that you're waiting to see people reactions to?
Think away from spoilers. I would really like to see the reactions to particular pieces of content that I would not mention. And also, I'm really curious which will be the people's favorite mercs. Like, if we have a poll or something, I would be really excited to see which mercs will come on top after this.
Yeah, we were talking about this before the stream too. It's just like there's all this research and detail and character building that went into every single merc, their profile and how they respond to things. So, um, should I even dare to ask if you have a favorite merc? Like, is there one that you're very
Yeah,
much?
I have one. His name is Ivan, and I liked him really much because in the first game he talked only in Russian, and I feel kinda privileged to understand at least partly what he's saying, while most of the world didn't. So when you heard him, he said something like "Я рад работать на тебя, проклятый капиталист," and I know what this means. I will be very happy to work from you, you damn capitalist, but
Uh,
I kind of felt this tingling inside, dissatisfaction that the rest of the people, at least not the non-Russian speaking world, doesn't. So
I,
even if Russians are not very popular these days, this is my favorite mark. He will always be. But I have quite a lot of competition for second place. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it was an adventure, and I don't remember exactly the voice actor's name, but I remember when we were trying to find the voice actor for Ivan, we went through quite a few iterations to find one that really fit, and we ended up doing castings in different areas of the world, trying to find someone that had authentic heritage and had the accent natural, and also spoke decent English. It was trying to bring those characters to life for all of the different regions, even like getting someone that was of different like heritages for some of the other characters that have some unique places in the world they're from. It was fun. I remember we had a whole dev stream I think about this. We're talking about the character creation. So
and the strange thing is that the Hollywood Russian accent, it sounds really fake to us in Eastern Europe and in Russia. So it's kind of a weird balancing act to find an actor that sounds authentic both to us and to an American person.
yeah, absolutely. Well, as much as I would love to talk about mercs all day today, um, we can't wait for Brad to kill our favorite merc. Oh, okay, come on. We're gonna be playing the game quite a bit during our launch live stream, so that we'll see how that goes. I hopefully won't let any merc die. I'm pretty careful about that, but you never know. So it's just true. Clay PL. So today we're talking about combat again, and I know that this is a topic that you are very eager to come and talk with everyone about because you obviously you're a creative director, but one of your primary focuses when it comes to how you and Bouillon with the Y split responsibilities were on the combat and kind of the core mechanic side.
Yeah, I am kinda together with Momchu that you've met last time. We are kinda very involved with the combat side. I would say that if the mercs are the soul of Jagged Alliance, the combat is its living, beating heart, pumping butt in the game. So it is the mechanic, the single feature, mega feature that we've worked most hard on. We've iterated stuff there so many times that right now, whenever somebody says something, usually the answer is we've tried this already, or it was like this back in 2022 or something. So yeah, I am really passionate about combat, as is most of the Jagged Alliance community. So yeah.
Yeah, it always makes me laugh, and this is not meant as a slight or anything. But whenever I'm reading forums, and I mean, obviously, and I'm a big gamer and a passionate player as well, so I understand the reaction. But it's always interesting to watch people say things. Oh man, these devs are so lazy. They're just copying X, Y, or Z, or why didn't they do this? It's a really bad decision. It's like, I mean, we spend a lot of time on this stuff, many long nights and days, trying different things and trying to get a balancing act. And it's no decision is made in a game like this without quite a bit of iteration and conversation. Game development's very hard and very complicated. And I know for a fact how much you and the other guys in the team have poured a lot of effort in the different ways that we've tuned and balanced and shaped the combat experience. I'll also say that I think it was some people have referenced, pulling mechanics from other games, and there are other games we drew inspiration from, but I think our main objective was to make Jagged Alliance 3's combat feel unique. Obviously there's a chance to hit part of the conversation. There's a lot of things that we did just to try to make it have its own personality and its own feel.
Unique, or at least true to the origin, and the origin was quite unique. Like there was a lot of time between even Jagged Alliance 2 and now Jagged Alliance 3, and not many games managed to replicate that feel. There were some kind of good attempts, but in general, that was our goal, to have it unique and to have it true to the series.
Yeah. So let's start going into some of the topic. If you haven't had a chance to read the diary, you can read it on community.jaggedalliance.com. That's where we post all of our dev diaries. So there's a really in-depth conversation. Though you don't need to read it per se right now. We're going to go through a lot of the meat of it during the talk. Now, one of the big things that we were talking about here is kind of how you trigger combat and how combat starts. So when you first load into the sector, in most situations, not always, but in most situations, you're in exploration mode. And just to give everyone kind of a refresher, what does exploration mode mean to us?
Yeah, exploration mode means that you are controlling your mercs in real time on the game map, not on the satellite view, but on the sector map. And you are kind of free to move around, like either setting the combat encounter, the future combat encounter, the way you want it to open, or kind of just explore the sector, as it in the name.
Yeah, it's kind of part of that real time, part of the experience because in exploration mode you're moving everything around in real time. You're not waiting for turns. There's no AP management. You can swap equipment or reload a weapon or do all these different explore, do different actions, and you can move your mercenaries independently. So there's a lot of freedom to move about. Um, Now, when there's enemies present in a map, because not all maps will have enemies all the time. Sometimes you've cleared on a map out, or you're in a town or whatever. When enemies are present, there's this element of how you like trigger combat. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works at a high level.
The enemies are there. They're usually unaware of your presence. If they are aware, then you are in combat. This is one of these rare cases where you said that you don't open in exploration mode. So the enemies are doing their daily business, either patrolling, talking with each other, or kind of having some ambient life behavior. Their sight in this case is a bit shorter. Like I noticed that people in the chat are asking about this. So in combat, enemy sight is just the same as merc sight, but before combat, when they are unaware, they're kind of not as not noticing you at as close a distance as when you are in combat. You are free to move around as long as you don't get too close, And you can also engage stealth mode and try to sneak. Uh, and when the enemies become aware of your presence, say when you attack them or they notice you, combat starts.
Now, combat can start a couple different ways, though, right? I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, if you shoot someone, there's going to be a combat start. But there is, things like I remember in the dev diary you talked about, there is like if they hear a sound that triggers them, or if there is if they see you at a distance. There's a couple of different ways that can happen. So there's kind of some multi layers into how an enemy decides to become aware of you, and then the turn-based combat gets triggered.
yeah. For example, they can just hear a sound like an explosion or a gunshot, and this will trigger combat. They can see something suspicious nearby, like another enemy dying, or a dead body, or an object landing next to them, like a flare or something like this. And in some maps, there are these watchtowers with spotlights that move around, and when they illuminate you, you might be noticed really quickly, and the enemies will engage.
Yeah, Quintus Cassius asked a question in chat about what is the detection distance, without with kind of medium values. I think it's always kind of tricky to qualify that because each merc's individual stats really does influence how wide or small that detection range is. Same with the type of action, right? Shooting with a silencer type weapon during the day is going to have a very different response than shooting with a non-silencer weapon at night. Um,
Yeah, the detection range when you are sneaking is very dependent on both your stats, like your agility stat, and the enemy stats, like his wisdom stat. But when you are not sneaking, I would say it is comparable to the effective range of handgun when the enemies are unaware. Something like
one
that, just to answer the question.
Yeah, one thing that I really like about that, and I mean, it sounds very math heavy, but the system works, I feel, very organically because of the way we built the UI. I always thought it was interesting to use and position mercs differently based on their detection radius, because some mercs you can get closer than others, and you can kind of set up your pre-combat layout for that first turn based on those values, right? People that are super sneaky, you can hide them and have them crouch and get closer, versus people that are not as stealthy need to be at maybe a distance and have a different type of weapon, like a more medium to long range weapon. So those decision making is kind of interesting. Um, Now, one thing we talked about in the diary is the fact that, and for this is obvious, I think, to most strategy fans, but it's still worth mentioning, is that whoever gets the first turn in a turn-based strategy game definitely has quite the advantage. And that's something we talked about in the diary a little bit there.
Yeah, basically, there are many kinds of turn-based strategy games, but the approach we've chose was that an entire team takes a turn. Like you can activate any of your mercs in any order, and then the entire other team takes a turn. Because A, this is in Jagged Alliance Legacy, it's true to the game source, and B, it provides a much richer decision space, like the order in which you activate the mercs, etc. It is very interesting strategically. But when your entire team takes a turn, it can feel very punishing for the other side. Like if I focus fire this enemy that is out of cover, I would most definitely take him out. As I said, the engagement range is comparable to weapon range, at least the short range weapons. So the first turn is kind of a big thing, and very early in game development, we've noticed that if the enemy turn, enemy team takes the first turn, uh, it kind of messes up the player pretty badly. Just because these enemies can be lethal, especially if they catch you at a position where you're at a disadvantage. Luckily, this is not reasonable to happen very often because usually you set up the terms of the engagement. Like you are either the aggressor or you are expecting an attack. This is usually the case of the game. In the game, so it made much sense to us to grant the first team to the player, and this is kind of the first turn. Sorry, I'm getting my words messed up a
Oh
bit.
no, no, no.
So it kind of made sense to us, and this is the way the game works right now. The player usually acts first, and the enemies act second. With a caveat.
Yeah, the caveat I think is the part that is and there was some debate about this in the Dev Dyer's response. Which I think is a good it's good that people are noticing the same things that we were talking about when we implemented this feature. But there are these times where the enemy when they first get discovered has a chance to move around and maybe take a small amount of actions right when combat is triggered.
Yeah, this is what we call the reposition phase. Like when combat starts, when we switch from exploration mode to combat mode, the enemy gets this reposition turn where each enemy unit can either move a very short distance to the nearest cover, or if he cannot reach cover, wherever he prefers, or very rarely execute a single attack action. This is not a full turn. It is
Right.
kind of like the equivalent to two action points or something like that. This is not exact, but something similar.
Yeah, and I think that was something that I noticed some people were bringing up other titles that have similar mechanics that were pretty frequent. It doesn't happen all the time, and the things that the enemies do during this reposition phase vary based on a number of factors. So you're not gonna, it's not like you're gonna walk in and they're gonna do a barrage at you every time and you have to deal with that. It feels very organic, like the enemy is responding to your presence and they get a small bit of chance to react, and you just have to factor that into the. In Spine Duke, does every enemy merc have this reposition turn? No, I mean, if it triggers, I think there's a certain number of them that get it. It's not every one in the enemy's side because that would
Uh,
be a little bit overwhelming, right?
Sometimes it is delayed. Like when you surprise the enemies, it doesn't happen in the very start of combat. It can happen later. But usually they get it. One of the reasons we want it is just to switch them from ambient behavior, like the enemy is sitting on the rock or having a chat, to something more combat-like, something that is fitting for the start of the conflict.
Yeah. So you're gonna find. I mean, I think the result is that you feel different levels of response, and some of it's based on how things are triggered. One thing I've noticed is that and this may have been an accident. It may actually be one of those things that just happened but wasn't directly engineered this way. It felt like the bigger your announcement into combat was, the more enemies that could be triggered and do a reposition phase if they decide to do it.
Yeah, of course, only the enemies that know about you are doing a position. Some might be too far away, or some might be already at a position where they're happy with. Like if there is a sniper at a watchtower, he would usually just skip his reposition phase or just move one step or whatever. Very rarely he may open with an attack, but this is more like an exception, some late game thing.
Yeah, and Weezer B, thank you very much for the raid. It's cool to have your community over here. Sector sizes vary. They're not all the same size, and some are larger and some are smaller. It just depends on the encounters there, and some of the encounter spaces, like I know this was in the preview build. The like for example the fortress combat encounter that happens pretty early on in the game, which I always reference earlier on maps because it helps reduce spoiler chance. That and combat encounter is a pretty big combat encounter space. So you're gonna have different sizes of engagements. Ones that are pretty up close and personal. Ones that are further away. There's another map in the early game where you have like these two hills, and you actually can set up snipers on one side and shoot across this valley if you want to take that a strategy approach. So there are definitely different engagement ranges and different ways that you can decide to approach those engagement ranges. So, moving on to the next element of this, which is, we talked about this a little bit because you were mentioning stealth and how stealth can, impact that reposition phase or whatever. Stealth is a big part of how combat starts and how enemies get alerted to you.
Yeah, not always. You are always free to just kinda go guns blazing, but many players enjoy a stealth approach. So it's just as easy as clicking a button and telling your mercs to sneak. Not everybody is good at this, but everyone can attempt this. When you sneak, you are harder to detect depending on various factors. And also, you can kind of try to start the combat with an advantage. Like your first attack, when the enemies are unaware, it might be very little in this case. But also things might go wrong. If you are detected while sneaking, you might find yourself not in ideal positions for the engagement because you will be out in the open, and even with the first turn being yours, it can hurt sometimes. So there is an element of risk to it. One thing that was very important for us was to not turn this into a stealth game. Like, we don't want an experience like Desperados or Commandos or something like that. We want this to be a viable approach, but not the main approach. And if you want to play without stealth, you should be able to do most of the content this way, and you will not feel crippled. But it is an interesting approach, and many
Yeah,
mercs are very good at it.
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it was definitely a balancing act. You know, there are certain players that want to leverage those types of mechanics, and it's very without even attempting to. It's very easy to make them dominant features, like dominant ways to approach a combat encounter. Oh, the right way to start combat is always stealthy. Um, but I feel like there's some nice mixes about using stealth and not using stealth, and having positive ways to get into combat from both sides. Um, Now, there's what factors go into determining how stealthy a merc is when they're in a sector, when it comes to enemies detecting them at least.
Yeah, I talked about this a bit, but I will go into detail this time. The most important factors are your stats and the stats of the enemies that you are trying to sneak by. Like, only certain attributes, not all the stats, but your agility and the enemy wisdom. Besides that, the weather and the light, plays an large impact. Like, if it is dark, it is easier to be stealthy, obviously. The direction you are approaching the enemy from, if you're going from behind, it will be easier to get closer. The foliage, like if there is a tall grass or smoke or something like that, this will help you become detected more slowly or get closer before being detected. And finally, line of sight, like if you are behind a wall or if the enemy can't see you, you're safe basically. If all the enemies that are nearby can see you.
Yeah, that's a good. So Red Risky. It's funny you mentioned that. Red Risky asks, "Why aren't we showing more gameplay considering the game is coming out next week?" We actually were just talking about this during the pre-roll. One challenge we have is that we know a lot of people like these, want to have go through these combat topics, and some of these topics take a lot of time to get through. My script is like 4 pages long, and we're already a little bit behind schedule because we're 30 minutes in, and we have a lot to go through. And we were talking about maybe having a save file loaded up and trying to show some of this stuff in real time, but it would have been really difficult to get through all the information we wanted to go through to give kind of the developer's perspective on what we're doing. So I think we've played the game a couple times live, and we probably should have maybe tried to do a more live interactive game stream this one, but we also know just how much people wanted, just from the questions they ask, how much they want to dive into the details, and we're trying to catalog the questions and go through them. So you're not wrong. We probably should have had save files ready to show for today, but it's tough because it's if we did that, then each conversation takes yeah, no, we do. I think we're gonna do. I was actually talking about this a couple days ago about like we're gonna do a live stream on launch day next Friday, and we're gonna play the game live pretty much that whole stream. Um, we are debating right now on whether we're going to do a stream next week on Thursday or not. We're leaning towards doing it. So we'll have 2 streams in a row. And if we do a stream next week on Thursday, we'll definitely play during that stream. But we had all these topics we had to get through before release. And, you know, we had to, we actually were trying to debate about how to get the art one in because we wanted Nelson to come and talk, and we used that one for Ian. So it's, it's a balancing act.
Basically,
So.
we love talking to you guys.
Yeah, maybe. But you're not wrong. It's what you're asking is a conversation we actually just were having today about debating between playing the game live more and going through the combat topics. So, I think another thing to kind of mention is that the when you're going through those like uh, discovery phases like with stealth and everything and all the different impacts like darkness and foliage and line of sight and whatnot, there is like some UI feedback so you have an opportunity to react, right? You don't just all of a sudden get discovered. Maybe you
Yeah,
can talk a little bit about how that works and how players can respond to those mechanics.
absolutely. This was another feature that we've iterated heavily on, although not as heavy as on combat in general. initially we've been through some revision of the user interface, like some enemies had circles around them or stuff like that. I will not go through this in detail, but the thing that we ended up with, that we are shipping the game with, is this kind of we call it detection bar or hit bar below the merc. When you start being discovered, this bar starts to fill slower or faster depending on the conditions, and you see an exclamation mark above the head of the enemy that is watching towards you. And if the bar gets full, combat starts in that moment. If you manage to get out of sight or attack before that, combat will not. Of course, if you attack, combat will often start because of the attack, but you are undetected at this point.
Yeah, but there's and the way that there's a couple different types of ways you can do stealth killing. So, yeah, Mr. Montage. I mean, it's just we have a lot of topics to go through. We do want to do, and I think there was plans to do a dev diary on co-op. But it's more about getting through all the topics before release, and there was a lot to go through. So for stealth killing, how does stealth killing work, and what are some of the different options that you can do there?
Stealth killing happens when you make an attack from stealth and when you are good enough to make an instant kill with that. Like if you're stealthy and undetected, there is a chance to do a stealth kill. This chance may be zero. If you suck at stealth, it might be higher. It depends on various factors, like during combat, it is harder to make a stealth kill than when the enemy is unaware. But basically, it is an initial lethal attack most often. And it can be done both with firearms and with melee weapons.
Yeah, the and the melee weapons. I know in the dev diary you're talking about kind of the prep time. How does the prep time work for melee weapons?
Yeah, there is a special. It is basically a user interface issue, but it turned out into a feature. Like, I will start a bit far, but bear with me. Our attacks, contrary to some other games, are very involved. So, like when you are setting an attack, you make several decisions: which body part to target, whether to aim. Uh, you have this fine level of control. And during combat in turn-based mode, it is not a problem to have this control because there is no time pressure. But in real-time mode, in exploration mode, like when you are trying to set up a melee attack, you have to click really fast to do it, and this is not pleasant in a strategy game, in a turn-based strategy game. So for melee attacks, we've came up with this feature called Prepare Takedown that allows you to set up your melee attack in advance when the enemy is far away, not yet able to detect you. Like you are saying, I am going to target this guy's neck with my machete, and I am going to aim, and afterwards the attack is locked in, and if you manage to sneak through melee range, like it is not executed, you are not going in a straight direction, you have control over your character. If you manage to get in melee range without being detected, the merc will automatically execute the attack. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, Jimmy Lee, for I'm going to answer your question since you made a point. I still don't know why some questions from chat are answered and some are not. So, just for full disclosure, I have a document here. We have someone in the background that captures all the questions, and we try to balance out answering them in real time versus answering them at the end. It's just a balancing act, right? Because I have a lot of topics to go through. Sometimes we can grab some. What's ironic is I just grabbed a question, and then people were complaining, "Why are you spending 5 minutes answering this question? Why are you talking about what you said you're going to talk about?" So it's always just it's a dance. I'm not really trying to ignore anything. I just try to keep the show going, right? Keep it entertaining, keep things fun. Maybe you don't like the questions I take, but it's just a decision. It's trying to make everyone happy, and also trying to get through everything is not the easiest thing in the world to do. So sorry if you didn't get the questions answered that you wanted. Now I think the one thing I really liked as well is the ability to because with the stealth attack, there's some benefits to that. There's some like stat benefits, I think, when you're in stealth for some of those attacks. And I really like that there's a way to go back into stealth during combat, which it may not be obvious all the time from what we've shown so far. And it's a mechanic that I was really excited about when we added that in, because I remember I think it was you and I were actually talking about this back quite a while ago, where it's like we were trying to figure out how to add more vertical depth into combat and different options that you can have and decision making. And I remember kind of having that conversation about how like you could use covering fire and distracting fire so someone could reposition, and we were debating about how you could do that in a turn-based strategy game that would not make things feel weird and not slow things down. And I think one way we attempted to add a little bit of that fantasy or that simulation in is the ability of going kind of back into undetection mode for a singular unit or one or two units based on their detection range and blah blah blah, a couple different factors. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. How does stealth
Yeah.
work when you're in combat?
Yeah, I can explain this like when you're in combat and you have a character that is out of sight for all enemies. Nobody sees him. He or she can enter stealth mode. This has some costs, like they will move more slowly, but the enemy AI will ignore them until they are detected, and they can attempt stealth attack mid combat this way. It is much harder when the enemies are aware of you. The chance to succeed is minuscule compared to at the opening of combat, but some mercs, especially guys like Shadow, can do it and can be pretty effective with this.
Yeah, and remind me because I apologize if I'm remembering this wrong, but isn't there like a stress mechanic on the enemies that kind of determine how well they can detect certain player characters in certain areas or something like that? Or did that get changed?
Mm, it is not exactly a stress mechanic. They are differently skilled at detections based mostly on their stats, but also on the fact whether they know the enemies are nearby or not. Like they can be unaware, they can be suspicious, or they can be aware. And all of this changes their ability to detect you.
Okay. Now I know we have to get Bouillon with a Y back out here because this is the Bouillon party today. But there's one more topic we want to go through, which is yeah, the Bouillon with an I and Bouillon with a Y, which is the way that we do well we call them is the interrupts, but it's basically the concept of Overwatch, which is a pretty popular topic when it comes to turn-based games. So we don't just have Overwatch; we actually call it something else, right? And that's called interrupts. How would you define interrupts? Like, what does that mean? We're talking about interrupts.
Interrupts is the general term, and Overwatch is one specific type of interrupt. And interrupts are attacks that happen during the enemy team's turn. Like if you are with the mercs, interrupts happen during the enemy's turn, and the enemies can use interrupts in your turn as well.
And Overwatch is probably the most popular one.
Yeah.
But so maybe a good like place to dive into is how do you set Overwatch in Jagged Alliance 3? Like, obviously it's a little bit different than some of the other Overwatch mechanics that are out there.
Yeah, my biggest regret is actually that we've named it Overwatch, not because it is a bad name, it is an excellent name, but because XCOM is so prominent that people immediately imagine XCOM Overwatch. And in
Right.
our game, it works quite a bit differently. It is not unique. I've seen some games like it, like possibly the Gears Tactics is the most famous example. But you set Overwatch by selecting an area. You're moving a cone shaped area based on the type of the gun and some other things. You are moving this area and you are selecting an area in which you will execute interrupts. And this is an example of this thing that I was talking about, the fine level of control in the decisions. Like this provides bigger decision space for you than just clicking a button and going into Overwatch mode and automatically interrupting. Because you can kind of formulate a plan in your head and then watch it unfold. Like this guy will watch that side, this guy will take out the door, or I will concentrate all my characters over watching this area, and if somebody enters it, he will get kind of hammered down. So this is the way Overwatch works in our game. There are some specifics, like certain weapon types have wider cones or shorter cones, and also the depth of the cone is an interesting decision because the farther you extend it, the most likely you are to execute an attack, but the most likely is that this attack will miss if the enemy is at the high end of the range. So quite often we want to set shorter range of Overwatch just to conserve, because Overwatch provides a limited number of attacks based on your remaining action points. You want a shorter range just to be certain that the attacks will have a decent chance to hit.
Yeah, I really like the fine level of control because what you just mentioned is a big part, right? If you have a certain number of Overwatch shots, or if you have a gun that has low ammo, you really want to guarantee that your shot goes to uh, control the battlefield as best as possible, right? So if you want to set a really far Overwatch, you may end up having someone trigger it that is, a very low chance to hit. Or if you set it, so you may want to control it being too short or too wide. So having that extra layer and granularity of control is really really nice. I think it's a neat factor. My favorite aspect of our Overwatch mechanic though is how you can use it before combat starts. I think the ambush system is really neat, where you can actually set up because you can enter into Overwatch before combat goes and actually layer these different areas that people are going to shoot at once combat starts and a reposition phase may happen. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, this like almost an entirely different mechanic. In exploration mode, in this daytime mode that we talked about earlier, you can also set Overwatch. But this Overwatch will not trigger immediately, even if an enemy enters the cone. It is more like your plan for executing an ambush when combat starts. So, for example, I have four mercs. I put three of them overwatching different areas, hopefully areas that enemies will move through when combat starts, and then I engage with the fourth merc. And when the enemy start their reposition phase, uh, this is the moment when the overwatches will trigger. Like if you set it correctly, you can kinda get an even more advantageous combat start than would you only have with the stealth attack. So Overwatch in real-time mode is basically setting up an ambush, and often it will not happen like you expect it. Like you might be detected as you are trying to get to the perfect positions and setting the Overwatch over the perfect areas. But when it works, it's sweet.
Yeah, yeah. I think it adds another one of those layers like you were talking about. Stealth, like just doing stealth kills is not necessarily the only. It's definitely not the only way to approach it. Sometimes setting up ambushes where you really have a unique set of, okay, I'm gonna attack and all these guys are gonna fire and this is my opening barrage. It allows some of those different ways to start combat and actually begin your engagement. So I think that's really kind of neat. Now, just before we bring Bouillon on to talk about environment effects, what are some of the other interrupt attacks that are out there?
Yeah, there are quite a lot. I will talk about some of them, but not all. Like we
Sure.
have a weapon type called a machine gun. With machine guns, you are most effective when you set up an area. It is set up similarly to Overwatch, but the mechanic works differently. Like you are setting this cone-shaped area, it is a huge area with most machine guns, and you can execute attacks only in this area. Like you are standing at a bipod overwatching this area, and in the enemy turn you are getting additional attacks. Like you don't have to conserve your action points in this type. These attacks are limited. With right unlimited attacks during the beta, it was horribly unbalanced, but they're on top of your action points, and it can be devastating. Another skill that I really like is for melee characters. I am not sure about the exact name we ended up with, but basically melee characters can have this perk that allows them to threaten the entire area around them with, let's call them opportunity attacks or interrupt attacks or whatever. So when a guy with a knife gets next to you and he has that skill, even if you survive his initial attack, you are in kind of a bad spot, because to shoot him from point blank range or to get out of the area, you would have to take another attack. So possibly another guy on your team will have to bail you out by taking care of the threat or something like that. It creates very interesting situations, especially when two or three of these guys approach you. It is more interesting on the enemy side than on the merc side, I think. And this was, by the way, another design goal with interrupt attacks, to create interesting situations. Like not only when you use them, but when the enemy uses them against you. Both with Overwatch and this melee threaten thing. And also we have some unique perks particular to some of the mercs. Like we have general perks and unique, but the unique ones are more zesty, I would say. Like we have a guy that makes interrupt attacks with grenades. Like when he's attacked, he whops a grenade. That's red, and it is quite spectacular. And also we have a guy that has this perk called Eyes on the Back, and he overwatches in a circular area, like the entire huge area around him. So it creates quite a different feeling when setting up this or pairing it with other overwatches. Finally, we have some general skills that anyone with high enough perks that anyone with high enough stat can acquire, like retaliating when you get damaged bad or when you are missed by an attack or stuff like that. All of this is based on character stats. I will not go into details, but we have quite a lot of interrupts in the game.
Yeah, and I think those extra levels of flair when it comes to Omeran has
Omnium,
the
yeah.
circular. You saw that in the Mercs trailer, Rocket Master, we just released recently. Yeah, so there's like some of those different ways of doing the different types of interrupts really kind of add more elements into what you decide to do and how you decide to kind of build your mercs or which mercs you decide to take with you, which I think is really cool.
And
One person was
Raven,
asking. Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was responding to chat. Raven also has an Overwatch related perk, yeah, but it is not the circular radio, it is another perk.
Well, yeah, we'll have to wait till the game comes out to find that one. I'm gonna answer one question that went by really quick because someone was asking. I think it was Frubound was asking about RPG sevens and why we have them if we don't have a lot of vehicle gameplay. As you may have heard and probably seen in the different videos, there's quite a lot of destructibility and ways that you can blow open buildings or use those to create different areas of attack or lines of attack or pathing or whatever, or even maybe even dropping an enemy from a top floor to a bottom floor off a balcony. So some of the explosive weapons also can be used as AOE type weapons, but they're very useful for destruction and kind of controlling the different spaces based on how you want to use destruction. So I know there was a question in the forums or on the dev diary. This dev diary is like how much destruction is in the game, and it's like there's a lot. You can do quite a bit when it comes to blowing up walls or blowing open floors and buildings and stuff like that to both change how you're discovering enemies or even maybe even dropping them from the floor or whatever. So it's kind of fun. Buyan, I think we're gonna bring Buyan with a Y up here for a little bit, but we're gonna have you out here for questions. So thank you very much, and we're gonna see you in a little bit.
All right, thank you. It was fun.
Yeah,
Boyan.
I love how Buyan's like, "Hey, Buyan, come out here." Um, so yeah, don't worry, we're gonna bring Buyan with an I back up during questions. We're actually because I took some questions during the stream, we're running a little bit late, so our question time at the end may not be as long as I was hoping. But I do want to get through some of the environmental stuff, and we got to get Bouillon with the Y back out here because it's been a little while. I hear he has his headphones on, so Bouillon with a Y. It's been a little while since everyone's seen you.
Yeah, I had a bit of a rest from streams, but I'm back in action here.
Right, back in action. The
Yeah.
I know that I think it was last stream. Everyone's like, "Where's Bouillon?" Like he was here for like every stream for in the first like 5 or 6, and now we haven't seen him. So there were some theories that maybe you had like disappeared or whatever, but no, you're still around.
I was lurking behind the camera.
Yes, 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 yes. So I'm gonna jump right into it because we have a lot to go over and a little bit of time to do it. The other aspect that we haven't covered yet, as far as combat mechanics are concerned, is something a few people have asked about, but we've never had a chance to dive into it in deep, and that's kind of environmental effects and time of day. And if you haven't, there's a whole section about this on the dev diary that's worth reading through. But we're going to go through them here in some detail. And this is something that we really added in, not just as a visual element, but to add different flavor and to allow maps to not always play the same way when you go to them, because you can go to different sectors multiple times.
Yeah, basically there were of course two main reasons to do this. Of course, the immersive part of just the world feeling different when you visit the same location again, having the day-night dynamic and picking at which point, which time of day you approach a situation. It was important both in terms of immersion and in terms of gameplay. And we wanted to shake up the combat based on what weather effects you had. We really wanted it to play differently, and each weather effect or time of day basically tackles a different gameplay aspect on and tries to allow combat to flow a bit differently, focusing on that specific weather effect as an inspiration for how to do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't tie just to weather because I mean obviously weather is the more dynamic system, but there is kind of that day night cycle, and day and night have their own set of light mechanical changes that get injected into the combat space.
Yeah, basically that's something, of course, we took from Jagged Alliance 2. I used to play a lot with the nighttime approach in Jagged Alliance 2. I even built whole squads of specifically night combat mercs, or with equipment for night combat. And we wanted to capture this and reuse it, because choosing the time of day is something you can easily do, relying on weather is more difficult in terms of tactics. But choosing to go at night when stealth options are much more easier to use, or taking advantage that it's night and you are covered in darkness and are harder to hit, but you have either equipment or use consumables to light up the enemies and have this tactical advantage over them.
Yeah,
So
and Claypiel, I saw your comment about night vision goggles and helmets. I was hoping we were gonna have a chance to get into some of those bigger topics. I don't know if we're gonna have time to get to them in today. We may have to save that for another stream. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely that element of what equipment you bring and how that impacts your build and your approach to each. I know Claypiel. There's so much to go through, my friend. We're supposed to only have 10 minutes. We're probably gonna end up going long, so we're doing the best we can, my friend. Trust me. So. Let's go through some of the different environment and weather effects, just so we can touch on each of them. And the first one we've already kind of talked about, which is that night or that underground. And this is where darkness has its own kind of elements into it, and there's different parts of darkness that um, uh, you have to respond to.
basically, you could be either in the dark or in light areas. That's something that you can see as indicated, like with a white dot or a black dot on the Merc's tag. It's also pretty easy to notice it just by the visuals in the game. When you're in the darkness, it's harder to spot enemies. It's harder for enemies to spot you, so it provides a lot of sneaking opportunities. And also, you are harder to hit because it's more difficult to aim at you. Of course, this is mirrored back at the no, to the enemies if they're in the dark. You need to find a way to either light them, or you have penalties when attacking them. And the cool thing is you can use a lot of equipment, or actually situational elements in the level itself. So levels have different light sources. Some of them are more dynamic, like the searchlights, which will actually review you very quickly if they catch you. They In real time mode they will move gradually, so their light moves, and in combat they move at the end of the turn. So there's even in turn-based mode there's an element there. But you could bring in glow sticks or flares to throw at enemy positions, so they're in the light and they're easier to hit, while you remain in the dark areas and they're harder to hit and get these defensive modes.
Yeah, this the screenshot we have right here. It's an interesting question. Someone was asking why there's a merc that was carrying a light stick but still had kind of the darkness applied to him. Is that really based on just their visibility and certain factors as it combines, or how does that work?
So we simulate the light. I'm guessing that the screenshot captured him just in the act of throwing, because the
Yeah.
effect is applied when the glow stick lands.
Okay, so when you pull the glow stick out to throw it, that's probably exactly. I think in that screenshot he is getting ready to throw it, so it's probably an action he's taking, and the
Yeah.
effect hasn't happened yet because it doesn't happen
There's
in real time.
actually more deeper story. I'm gonna spend like 20 seconds on it. Uh, Actually, the light was fully simulated every second in the game, but that created sort of a problem purely in the level of the optimization. So it's delayed. When it lands, it will apply the effect.
That makes sense. Um, Helping Hans, good to see you, my friend. Good. Hope you're enjoying the stream. So let's go into some of the other environmental effects real quick. Also, I'll really quick to finish on that topic. It's not just light; it's also or nighttime. It's also underground because there are maps that are like inside of mines or inside of different underground spaces. So the underground spaces also follow kind of the nighttime rules.
Yes, and there are even some cool aspects in some of the underground maps where you can turn off all of the lights and go in with the night vision goggles. And
Hmm.
if you manage to use the correct mechanical skill on certain in certain specific underground sectors, you can go turn off the lights and go in with the night vision goggles and get this tactical advantage.
Yeah, responder. I don't think there was a color. I mean, we were obviously always tweaking lighting and whatnot. It could be based on different times of day or different maps. Each map has their own lighting profile, both in terms of light and darkness, as well as their saturation and other things. Right? Some are more vibrant and rich. Some are more subdued. We try to create a nice color palette and environment palette. Speaking of, the next one we want to go into is dust storms. So dust storms are another real fun effect. That's a more dynamic weather event that can happen in certain types of sectors. So, what is dust storm? How does that impact the gameplay aside from being dusty and seeing things move around visually?
Ultimately, on the stones, my idea was to make cover a bit more prominent because taking cover in the dust storms improves the effects of cover, so it's even harder to hit somebody in cover, and you have to use the terrain more to your advantage. Try to flank enemies so they are exposed, and you can shoot them more easily that way. And that's one of the big aspects. It also limits how fast you can move. So movement during a storm is more difficult, and that counterplays with the cover aspect. So if enemies get very well entrenched, you're going to have a tough time trying to move around them and get to the right position to flank them.
Yeah, it also I think that also allows different types of like weapon usage and optimization, right? You may decide to bring more melee heavy mercs or pistols or smaller close range fire as opposed to like a whole bunch of snipers or something. So it kind of forces you to try different strategies.
Movement aspect of handguns really helps, but also something that could be very fun to try, depends on the map, is actually using a lot more of explosives to blow up the cover and destroy the cover so they lose that benefit from the storm, basically.
Makes sense. Now, something that because the names are similar, but the effects are very different. We also have firestorms,
Ooh.
and firestorms are a kind of a neat effect. They're not as common, but there's a lot of dynamics to them when they happen.
They are quite rare, but when they happen, it's a very different feeling because there are fires throughout the level, and standing close to fires can get your mercs tired. It's based on their health skill, I think. It's a stat check. If they are standing close to fire, they can get tired, which will reduce their action points, and they may even go unconscious if they fail too many checks. So it's a bit unpredictable. There is ways to try to funnel enemies in close to fires, like using actually machine guns or Overwatch, to try
Right.
to take it into to take advantage of this. It's a bit more difficult. It's a lot more chaosy of a type of environment effect. So it's definitely fun, and since it's rather rare, I always enjoy playing these kinds of missions.
Yeah, I think the idea of like the heat effect, and I'm gonna skip forward one on my list just to touch on because they're related. That heat effect causing energy reduction and lost action points and eventually collapsing is a really neat one. It sound 'cause we use that in multiple different places, right? So we also have a heat wave kind of effect, which is kind of appropriate right now, seeing that it's super hot everywhere. And out here where I live, it's been very, very hot lately. The heat is something that really does reduce energy, and you can have that collapse effect. I know that in the heat map state, it also has that kind of wound interaction too, right? That's a different one for
Yeah.
just the heat state.
So basically, again, it's related to the energy slash stamina mechanic.
Right.
Um, so when you get wounded, you again do a check on your attributes, and if you fail, you get tired. You the merc will get a state of tired and can go either exhausted or even unconscious. But it is stat dependent, so it really there's an aspect of which mercs are in this situation. So if you go with Livewire, which who has very low health, she will get tired quite quickly, and it's more dangerous for her as an
Yeah.
environmental effect. While if you go with Steroid, who has like best health, he will probably carry out throughout the whole fight without any effort.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Now, another one that I think is related to the dust storm we're talking about is fog. A little bit more simple. It doesn't have the same range of different types of things that Duststorm does, but fog is another effect that is mostly just kind of reducing the visual range across the map.
So, in gameplay terms, it was the idea to do a way to um, force you to change into a more close combat approach. And the visual idea was like these silhouettes of enemies coming out of the fog. Like it's too foggy and you can't say who's coming, what's going on. And actually, Nelson came out with a very nice effect for this. If you see an enemy that's too far or a unit that's too far away, you get like this silhouette and there's just question marks. You don't know what type of enemies, what he's carrying as weapons, and you have to try to get close to be more effective. While in this obscured state, enemies there's a chance that enemies will get a grazing hit. You're not really sure where exactly the enemy is, so you're shooting, and some of the hits might be just grazes, which are less damage. Again, a bit of based on chance. There's a chance for this to happen, and it creates a bit of, again, a bit more chaotic experience, but also forces you to move in close. And
Yeah.
since it's again easier to actually use stealth while it's foggy because vision is reduced, it's a great way to try some melee approaches to combat encounters.
Yeah. One question I thought was really appropriate to what we were just talking about a second ago, that I want to grab really quick. Cordnor was asking, so if you go unconscious in battle because of energy, is there any chance to get up, or are you knocked out until the end of combat?
Uh, I think there might be a way. Actually, that's something actually that the other one will be better at saying. I think most of them you have to wait for the end of the battle and rest to get from the unconscious state.
Yeah, there's once you hit exhaustion or unconscious, I think you have to rest in order to get them
Yeah,
recovered. But there might be an item or an action you can take as a medic. Bouillon would know more clearly. I can't quite remember off the top of my head.
I'm not specifically sure for the unconscious. There might be a role that can get you up and fighting again, but not really sure.
Yeah, and there there's some conversations going on that I don't want to get too deep into because they'll distract us about save scumming and different ways that players can save. There is quite a few options when you're starting a game that you can change how those mechanics work. So if you want to do Iron Man, or I think there's a couple of different ways options when it comes to save approaching that you can set or unset to give you some controls on what type of game you want to play. So if you want to not save scum, there's a way that you can do that. So to even remove the temptation. So it's definitely there. So let's go on to the next couple. We have a few more to go through. The next one would be heavy rain, which
Yeah,
is there's two types of rain. There's like normal or light rain, and there's heavy rain, which is ironic. 'Cause I think it was just raining outside right now a second ago, and it was light rain. So
we had the light rain, yeah, in here in Sofia as well.
yeah. So how does heavy rain work? Let's start with that.
So, heavy rain is the more drastic effect. It will have an effect on your weapons. They will lose condition easier. They will jump more often, which is quite noticeable in combat, and create again this a bit of a chaosy element in combat. But the most important thing in terms of gameplay in heavy rain is that aiming actually takes more action points. So it's
Mm.
hard to keep on aim while raining. Raining, you're not really sure if you've aimed properly. Your vision is obscured, so it takes more time to just aim down the sights and pick a target. And it creates a very interesting dynamic of how to spend action points effectively when you're used to aiming in a certain way, and this effect breaks this cycle.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm just the chat's still talking about the save options conversation, so I'm not meaning to distract on the points. I think I personally I think it's great to have different options for different types of players. So if you want to save scum, I mean, yeah, obviously the greater internet may sometimes frown on you about that, but there are people that have limited time to play games and they don't want to sit there and they want to just get through their story experiences and have a good time. So they want to set things on an easier difficulty or don't want the random dice roll to kill their favorite merc. They can do that. If they want to play a more hardcore, more tense version, they can. I think games are for everybody. It's one thing that's there's always different types of players that want to enjoy games in different ways, and there's no reason to limit people if you can help it. If there's ways to not, obviously some implementations are much more costly time wise and to implement, but if it is relatively if there's a way to create systems that are more expansive than just creating different options for players is really, and I think that's at the core of Jagged Alliance as a Jagged Alliance 3 at least is in the earlier ones. You want to try to give as much options as possible for players to play differently, and that includes how they save. So
Yeah, I
it's
agree. I usually do playthroughs with the no saving during combat or just one Iron Man save, and those are great playthroughs. But they are more taxing on me. I feel more. I have to focus more on the game. Choices matter a lot more, and sometimes I just want to have a fun playthrough and just go blasting through all the enemies. And I do a less deep playthrough, and maybe even on easier difficulty.
Yeah, yeah, definitely is trying to incentivize that player choice. The tough part is that sometimes certain decisions are a lot more complicated because you have uh, you know, uh, you want to give freedom, but giving that freedom could break balance or break systems or break, different types of things. I know that, and Booyan with an eye is a better person. Maybe we'll try to tackle even though we're running late about like the head slot and armor and itemization and inventory. I think we did a stream on inventory back a while ago and how the systems work. So I can't rehash all of that, but there's a lot of complexity that simple decisions or very small decisions add into a game very, very quickly, especially one as expansive with so many characters and equipments and items and weapons and blah 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 as a game like Jagged Alliance. So there's layers to the decisions and how they impact things. Respawn Z, since we're on this topic, I'm gonna go ahead and take this question, even though we got to
Yeah,
finish
sure.
off. Um, what do the difficulty levels affect save gains, money, enemy strength? I believe there's a number of different factors that you can modify, so you have some control there.
Yeah, I can go into it in a bit more detail. So the basic difficulty levels, so there are three difficulty levels. They affect how much money you gain from mines. So the economic aspect is easier on the easier difficulties. The harder you go, you have to spend more, be more focused on time management and money management. They also affect the stats of the enemies. So enemies will be more better at certain things and even have higher experience level at higher difficulties. This actually you can actually change difficulties on the fly in the game, so this will affect the next map you enter. But you can even try to get the game go a bit higher in difficulty or go a bit lower if it's too hard for you, and this also creates an interesting aspect. One thing that is actually quite important in terms of difficulty and doesn't scale on the fly is the starting money you start with the game with. This will drastically affect what mercs you take at the start. What's your original squad team? That's very interesting aspect of the difficulty choices. And there are some additional what we call game rules. There are some additional things you can turn on and off. One of this is like having the ability to save during combat or not, or having just a single save file and always overwriting that on the Iron Man aspect.
Yeah, the starting money thing is a really strong point because the if you get a more advanced merc or a couple more advanced mercs at the start, it completely shifts
Yeah.
the combat encounters in the beginning because that advantage over skill can be pretty impactful. And likewise, if you decide to take a really cheap start and using all of the lowest tier mercs at the start, and you don't have that one kind of anchor or hero merc, you're gonna have a very different experience at the start too. So those changes, inadvertently, it's a cascading thing, right? They put a lot more pressure on how quickly you need to get mines and how much that's going to sit there and weigh down your hiring rights. So there or your hiring length. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of dynamics there.
It's both combat will be a bit more difficult because the enemies are more capable, and of course, having to manage your team better and forcing you to think a bit more strategically on the strategic map. That's also a big difficulty at times. Also,
Yeah.
the enemies on the strategic map will be more aggressive in on the higher difficulties. They will attack more often.
Yep. So we're getting into the question section, and I feel bad because Bouillon with an I isn't out here. We always do the questions with both of
Yeah.
you, but I do want to finish the last topic on the rain stuff because
Oh,
everyone was wondering.
he'll join us for that as
Sure.
well.
People ask why we don't always take all the random questions during the stream as we go, and the reason why is because then we get off topic and then we forget what we were talking about, and then it's just a confusing mess. But let's finish really quick. So we were talking about heavy rain, and there's also light rain. So what's the difference between heavy rain and light rain?
Heavy Rain, the main focus gameplay wise is the aiming, having aiming cost more action points, so it's harder to aim, and that's missing from the Light Rain. The Light Rain is mostly a wear and tear on your equipment. You have to be a bit more mindful of how often guns jam. If your gun is at low condition, you might try to switch on something else just to be sure that it doesn't jam on you.
Awesome. Can you scoop back just a little bit, Bouillon with the Y? Because you guys are like, you look like I leave you the camera, like, hey, how's it going? We get that like coolest man on earth look going on, or whatever that. What was that? I can't remember the commercial. There was that commercial for a while, like the most interesting man on earth, right? You had that kind of like side lean.
Oh yeah, those commercials were quite an inspiration for the Tropico series.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah.
I do not always take beer, but when I do, I prefer these
Whatever.
ones.
Oh man. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and just skip into the questions and see if we can get a couple of these before, because someone asked how much longer do we have, and right now we're about 11 minutes over schedule, but I want to go through some of them. So so one of the questions that I think is that comes up a lot is all around night vision goggles and equipment and whatnot. I'm going to ask one that Clay PL asked from before, but you know he asked it during chat and he also asked it here, which is really about like why we made the decision to not have specific item slots for different pieces of head equipment. On the chat he asked about that. I think in the forums it says. A couple questions arise where the night vision goggles go. Does not seem to have a specific item slot for it. So, is this something you can just talk about a little bit, Bouillon, since it's been something that's with an eye eagerly discussed and asked?
Night vision goggles currently use the head slot, same slot as the helmet. And the reason we've kept it this way is not some technical reason, like that is not a problem to create a helmet with night vision capabilities. It is a simple item property. But we really wanted you to make this trade-off. Like, do you want to sacrifice the defense to get the advantage, or would you prefer to be better protected? Of course, I do not exclude the possibility that in the future we create a helmet with night vision capability, but as far as I know, there isn't currently one in the game. Right?
I think no, we did discuss having the possibility to upgrade. So some items could be upgraded, like your chest piece armor could be. You could add ceramic plates to make it more difficult to penetrate. So we did discuss that, but there are quite a lot of night vision options. So you can have night vision scopes on some weapons as well. So there's the choice whether you waste the head slot and have leave your head unprotected, or use the scope slot for that, which would maybe require different setup of the entire weapon, as the scope is an important part and offers different combat possibilities.
But
Yeah, I think
can I tackle a question I saw earlier, because I think it was an interesting one?
sure.
Like, some people in chat were concerned that game rules would require finishing a playthrough before they are activated. So I just want to say that this is not the case. All of these are available from the start, both the difficulty levels and all the game rules for Iron Man, the thing we call forgiving mode, etc. All of this is available from the start. You can use it in your first playthrough.
Yeah. And I think there was a good debate about freedom versus trade-off, and it's always a tricky balance because you can give a lot of freedom and that can make the game feel more free but create less choice, and you also want to have choice that doesn't feel restrictive. It feels interesting and engaging, and trying to add some of the different things that we talked about with environment effects and different day-night cycles and underground. All of those experiences are really aimed at allowing tactical decisions to be interesting, builds to be interesting, things that you can decide so you're not always using a one size fits all strategy. And once you start creating like omni equipment or omni setups, where they can do a lot of different things, it may sound like it's a lot of freedom, and I understand I get it, right? I mean, the concept of, oh, you can do this in the real world, so why can't you do it in the game? I mean, it's a fair comment, and it's I mean, I don't know if you're gonna all like what we did. It's hard to say, but the goal was to really create fun choice that drives different tactical decision making, so that the game is engaging for the longest period of time. One thing that's worth clarifying on this point, and this is a challenge that I mean, and me being one of them, right? All of us turn-based strategy fans have, is that turn-based strategy games are actually very difficult to make engaging for long periods of time. Like a lot of turn-based systems become a little bit repetitive over time, and all of us, all turn-based developers, and I know a number of them at other studios personally. I've had conversations with them about this over the years. It's how do you engage people with different mechanic complexities once they've figured out the mechanics and have their system that works, or their approach that works, their skill set, their tool set. It's hard. You can do things like environmental effects or time, like XCOM 2 did time pressure as a big mechanic, and some people loved it and some people hated it, right? You're always trying these different things to remix the formula. So, adding things like environment effects and choice for equipment and things that help increase or impact those choices as your characters grow. It's just things that you try to help make the progression of turn-based games as engaging for as long as possible, and adding different. I call it, if you remember my analogy from during our development time together, gentlemen, like it was always, how do you add more ingredients into the soup, right? How do you add more flavors and more options in so you can make different types of soups and add those in at different periods of time? It's complicated.
Quite a few of the things we've discussed today were aimed at this problem, among other things, like the weather effects that you went through. A big design goal behind them is just to create variety, like you're in a new situation or you are at a known place, but things are different. Also, the interrupts we discussed earlier, like they're meant to shake the cookie cutter strategy, like create new. When you encounter enemies that use new type of interrupt, you have to adapt. And also when you yourself get a new type of interrupt in your arsenal, you kind of have this new option. Also the various types of throwable items like gas grenades, timed explosives, molotov cocktails, stuff like that, they were designed to shake things up and kind of not solve, because it is a difficult problem to solve, but kind of alleviate this tactical games problem.
Yeah,
And I feel that we have quite a good variety at this point. Like people are playing and they are saying, wow, I have 100 hours and I've encountered something different. And we are like, dude, you have 100 hours, really? So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I do want to grab a couple more questions. I'm trying to bounce back and forth here, and there's a few more. So I always try to grab some of the questions from the community site. Solaris Wave asked a few questions. I thought one of them I didn't know the answer to, and I was really curious about this myself. I guess I should because I've played the game enough, but I wasn't actually 100% sure. So they mentioned we mentioned, this is what Solaris Wave wrote. You mentioned that darkness conceals your position to a certain extent, and that lit up areas will negate that. Is there any feature where anybody in a brightly lit location will have difficulty looking into the darkness? So do you have that kind of, it's bright where I'm at, so I can't see into a dark area? I don't think we do, but I wasn't 100% sure.
So if you're in a lighted area which has light, you yourself will be exposed, but whoever is in the dark area will be harder to see, no matter if you're in the dark or in the light. So
Right,
it's
but if,
more about the defensive side of things.
Yeah, basically, we've thought about this. It is
Yeah,
a good idea from a realism perspective. It kind of makes sense because I have to adapt. But we don't want it to have two levels of the effect. Like the difference between you being in a lit and in a dark area, we want it to be significant. And if we double that difference when the onlooker is in the light area and the target is in the dark, it becomes too huge and it kind of breaks the realism. Like you don't notice things that are very close by. But it is a cool idea. I'm certain fans will implement it in a mod, and we've considered it. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that's how I thought it worked, but I wasn't sure because it's really just about discovery. Once you've discovered that light balance doesn't have an impact on accuracy, so that makes sense. The other one that he asked that you already answered, but I'm gonna just throw this in here, which is if indoors, what light sources are there and can they be switched on or off? We talked about that a little bit. Like in some of the undergrounds, you can turn off or on lights. There are a
More of
couple
a
different
Yeah,
ones.
it's not like a mechanic that's always present. It's more of a like in this location you have this option. It's more like a part of a quest or a good way to prepare for a very difficult fight. So
Yeah, it is the exception rather than
yeah,
the rule. Like most light sources don't have an on-off interactable.
or trying to shoot at the light bulb or something. We have discussed going into it, but it kind of forced you going too much in detail for this specific aspect of the game, and we
Yeah,
didn't
Jimmy.
want to be a sneaking game.
Right. Jimmy, I'm gonna grab your question. There's definitely co-op, Sujak, and you can
Yeah.
do co-op is drop in and drop out, and allows you to, as a host, you can assign different mercs to be used by your co-op partner. We were talking about trying to do a dev diary on it, but I think it's just we've had too much. There is no
Don't
Actually,
PvP.
don't
don't worry.
tumor. I'm not going
Just
to
check
zip
tomorrow.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. So see, now there's debates that have been going on about what we can and can't do while these mad people try to finish this game and do all the bug polishing. It looks like they're working even more. You
Yeah.
guys feel you sleep every once
You
in a while,
guys
right?
might be pleasantly surprised on this front very shortly, and I'm sorry for spoiling this, but yeah,
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to balancing the effort we put into all this stuff and also these guys getting some time to rest and also get ready for the release. There's a lot of stuff going on when you're getting close to shipping a game. I do want to grab the question from Jimmy Lee because everyone was excited about it, and so Jimmy Lee 4 asked, it would be nice. Wait, it would be nice TPO answer. TPO? Huh, I don't know TPO. TPO. What does TPO mean? How many what's the maximum number of enemies that can be in one sector? And can enemies also get reinforcements or backup during combat?
They can get reinforcements, but it's mostly when we do a very scripted encounter. It's not a general mechanic that will happen naturally with guard post attacks, for example. As to the maximum, I'm not sure if there's a specific number we cut it off. It depends on how squads move on the map. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some encounters with like 30, 40 enemies, and those are like extremely
yeah.
difficult to
I would say too
tackle.
many because in
Yeah,
this case the enemy turn is too long.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
these are not common encounters, but we do not have a hard limit. The game is a sandbox. Sometimes things happen, like a squad is traveling somewhere, and there are also defenders in this location, and you engage it at the
yeah,
same time, and it becomes kind of mid grinder in this case.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's one of the balancing acts as well with turn-based titles. We actually talked about how big we want encounter sizes to be, and the fantasy of having these large encounters sounds great in concept. In reality, you're sitting there watching a whole bunch of enemy turns take place, and that watching 30 enemies move and you get to move your 6 or 7 guys, it's just like, oh my gosh. And then you start trying to figure out new features or systems to speed those turns up. And once you do that, you have to reduce the tactical complexity. Like all these things are intertwined, right?
Yeah.
The more you want to speed up enemy turns, the less tactical depth you can have because you won't be able to understand what's happening during the enemy turn to respond to it. So it's this really crazy balancing act on speed and depth and ball. Yeah, I mean, Clay PL, you're 100% right. Civ is a great example. Civ just can grind to a halt later on where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm waiting for every nation to move 100 units. And this is, but if I don't watch them move, if I skip all the animations and I don't know what's happening, and then I make a bad decision because I wasn't aware of what was going on, and it's a tough balancing act. I mean, it's an attention problem, right? How much attention does a player really want to give to everything? And if you start increasing the amount of things they have to pay attention to, you decrease their excitement about the things that they're watching, and then it stacks. But to your point, it's you can like we talked about the whole like combat triggering experience. You could run around with like 5 mercs and trigger 4 combat encounters all at once, and then like good freaking luck, right? Like you can definitely do that because some maps have multiple locations of enemies, and it just depends on when and how you engage them. So if you want to be a maniac and try to fight the entire map all at once in different locations, I mean, I wouldn't do it, but be your guest, right? You can do whatever you want.
I think in general we've tried to sprinkle in some more tougher or longer lasting fights every now and then, just for the difference of the variety of experience that we talked about, even with the weather conditions. There are certain fights that are like multiple waves coming one after the other, and
Yep.
it's almost like there's no end to them. And there's, for example, there was a question of how big the maps are. There are different sizes based on how important the location is. But there's like this very big fortress at one point where there are quite a lot of enemies, and it's a very different experience. You can approach it from. Our goal was to have like 4 or 5 approaches
Yeah.
viable when we were designing this with the level designers, and I think there's even more now. So it's a very different tactical experience. Just deciding it's good to take multiple squads in there because there's quite a lot of enemies. It's a very different experience, and sprinkling this on top of the normal fights is just an excellent feel.
I'm gonna try to grab some. We're almost 30 minutes over time right now. I'm gonna try to grab some other random questions. There was one more I wanted to grab from the forum that I can answer really quickly. I'll just take this one. Wildfire was asking about destruction of the game, how destructible, how houses in detail. Can you blow up cars for new cover positions, etc., etc. There's a lot of destruction. There's a lot of ways to modify the world. There's ways to blow holes in things. There's some vehicles or things that are like that can blow up. There's explodable barrels. There's you can shoot. I think actually in our recent trailer released, you can see someone shooting through a cover object that's a soft cover object, like a box, and hitting a target behind it. There's a number of different things that you can do there to modify and use the environment to your advantage. So I think hopefully you're going to be happy with all the different layers of destructibility that are there.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Yeah. Yeah, I saw Azriel HD was like more minutes overtime equals more copies sold. Yes, that could or could not be true. It also is less time working on bug fixing on the crucial last week of the product. So it's every hour I rob of these guys' time has another cost too. Let's see if I can grab a couple other questions that were done earlier really quick. Let's see here. Um This is a hard question to answer. Dakan asked earlier, "What is the max range for combat?" Um, I don't really think there's a max range. Some
because
weapons have a pretty far range. You can shoot them from
yeah,
pretty far away.
there are sniper rifles that have very long ranges, but it's, I don't know, half the map usually at least.
Yeah, the weapon has this maximum range indicator, but it is possible to hit
Yeah,
beyond it, and the bullet will travel as far as it goes, basically. So even if you miss, you can hit something on the other end of the map and explode it. I don't want to commit to numbers, but it is way more than 2 gameplay screens or something like that with normal camera. The range that you can hit reliably with a sniper rifle and with a trained character.
Yeah, I don't know. I mentioned this earlier in the stream, but there's one early map where there's two like hilltops with a valley in between them, and you can set up snipers across the hill and shoot across to pick off enemies if you want, as kind of like a ranged attack option. So there's a couple of different things you can do there. Um, Loki asked this question earlier, and I think we already answered it, but it's a quick one. Are all sectors the same size? Absolutely not. They're different sizes. Some of the cities are massive. Some environments are a little bit smaller and tighter. So there's different sizes and different areas too, right? Combat encounters happen almost progressively. So there's different spaces that you fight in depending on the type of map. Some are a combat only map that's really like an area right in front of you, and you kind of progress to it very linearly. Some have a lot of open world areas where you can go different directions and different enemies, and you can kind of even scout out before and decide, do I want to kill all of them? Do I want to just take one and go around a side? Like there's different areas there. Um, Oliak asked how moddable J3 is. I think pretty moddable. I think there should be quite a few tools that you'll be able to use. That was
yeah.
important to us.
Again, let's see what we talk about tomorrow in the dev
Oh
diary.
The secret, not so secret thing.
The not so secret dev diary. Yeah.
Hey, this is why you come to the streams. You come to the streams to get the secret, not so secret teaser information. Uh, Claypiel's like, I don't think he likes the teasers. He or she. Sorry, I'm not trying to. Um, let's see. A lot of map size question. There's a lot of people are very curious about the
There
size of the
are
map.
no maps that are too small. We've taken care of that. There are not like maps that are 1 or 2 screens. Some are smaller, some are larger, as you said, but all of them are at least decently sized.
Yeah, and numbers don't mean a lot without you having to actually try it on to feel how it feels. The idea is that you can have multiple encounters happening on a map.
Pretty good one.
From encounter to encounter.
This is a good one I don't think we touched on that could be quick. I don't know if Spine Duke's still around. Can you explain what pin down and retaliation statuses are? I think they were noticing them in different screenshots.
Yeah, pin down is an action that you can attempt with a rifle type of weapons. You kinda take this enemy in your sight, and you will shoot him or her at the next turn if they are in your sight yet. And you also give, I think, a bonus to your teammates for attacks against this particular enemy. It is another action that we've designed to create situations. Like when it is used against you, it is even more interesting. Like you have this problem, this sniper on the other side of the map is pinning down one of your characters. Do you move out of sight? Do you try to take them out? Do you kinda tough it out and take the attack at the next turn? And retaliation, I talked about this for a bit in the interrupt section. Like some characters, like Red can retaliate with grenades. Some characters can retaliate when attacks miss them based on a stat check. Other characters retaliate when attacks hit them and do decent damage. So we have all of these things in the game, and we think that they shake things up quite a bit, especially when you encounter them for the first time.
I saw this question isn't in here, but I think it's tied to this question because I think I saw this about 20 or 30 minutes ago. Frubron or Bayun Frubron asked, can we modify the RPG 7? And I think right after that asked if we can do Overwatch with the RPG 7. Is the RPG 7?
No,
I don't think you can do an Overwatch without. Although I don't know what will happen if actually Omrin uses it with the special skill.
no, it is disabled for
Ah,
heavy
it's
weapons.
disabled, okay.
So I think the answer to both of these questions is no, but perhaps in the future.
There was an experiment with auto-fire RPGs just for the fun of it, and that was purely an experiment. It was fun, but it was like a crazy idea. It's not rocket rifles. We are not bringing rocket rifles back.
I love having worked with Bouillon for with an eye for a number of years. I love the no, and you can see the PTSD in the back of his eyes. He's like, dear God, we did that, and that did not work. Like you can just you can it's almost like that guy's seen some stuff. Like he's been through some things. You don't want to go where he. If you want to do it with mods, go for it, but you may not like what you find out. So it's I love it. There's this look in your eyes that I've seen so many times over the years. I love it. Some of these ideas, by the way, being on the producer's side, there have been a number of conversations. I'm like, yeah, what about this? And Bouillon's like, no, like you don't, man. It's like when like you're like, I think I'm gonna date this girl, and your friends are like, you really shouldn't do that. Like you really shouldn't. It's a bad decision. I mean, go ahead, try it, but in 4 months I'll be taking you to a bar and we're gonna have a conversation about why you probably should have listened to me in the first place. That's the Bouillon look. That's what I was trying to get for. That's exactly what he's doing right there. Hey man, just don't do it. Love it. Yeah, Raven Rises. These are the real questions we need answers to. Hey, I mean, we're here to help everybody. Press the Bouillon with an eye. He'll help you through life and through Jagged Alliance. All right. Let's see. Will Ian Curry be back in future dev streams? Yes.
Yes.
The plan is for him to be back. So, I mean, obviously, anything can happen, right? But the plan right now is for him to be back in a future dev stream. Not gonna tell you which one. Maybe soon, TM. But yes, the plan is for him to be back. This is a question the answer is no, but it's a really interesting one. Question: was there any face punching during Jagged Alliance 3's development? That was from Clay PL. What a random question.
They're face palming.
Face palming, right, but not punching. I don't think anyone
No,
fight.
fortunately, no. Right?
I don't know. There might have been something during mockup or during sound recording, but nothing intentional because of particular bug or problem.
Oh no, Claypiel. I think that was not JA3 though. Not in the Hemimont team. Not that I know of.
Yeah, Ian talked about J2.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had some intense conversations here and there, but no thing. And then yeah, Floa Look asked, will the devs be in the game as mercs? There are no devs in the game as mercs for this one, I don't think.
We hope that we'll get the Radu treatment someday, if we are worthy. So, yeah, I would even provide voice if you guys are wanting to make the mod. I would be glad to be immortalized like that. But Radu should go first because he's awesome as a merc.
Oh man. Let's see. Is there anything else? This is one I think we already addressed this on the previous stream, but I'll take it. Why not? This will be my last one unless someone asks a question in real time, and then we're gonna wrap this up. Zith Nero asks, do you still have the weird mechanic if you miss the targeted body part, but the bullet hits another part of the body, it does no damage? I think we adjusted some things about that, didn't we?
Currently, the bullet will miss the body in this case. So it will not hit the body and do no damage, but if you are aiming at the hand, it is not possible usually to hit the body. And this is something I'm taking a good hard look at, and I am considering taking a second stab at post-race. But currently it works like that.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple streams ago, and I know there was some conversations that spun off internally about, okay, maybe we should revisit this concept again. It would probably be a post-release change. I don't think there'd be anything we would do at release because we're too close. Yeah, I would be very, very anxious if we want to make any change like that now at this stage with only 1 week to go. But our plan is to have quite a bit of post-release support. I know everyone's asked about DLC a couple times, and we are still completely focused just on the game right now. But there's or the release right now, but we're hoping that the game does really well and we can do a lot of post-release support, and that's the hope. We really love the product. We've worked on it for a long time, and we really want to no day zero. I mean, this is a PC game, right? Steam. So you release the game and then you watch things that are going on. There's been a pretty extensive QA process on this product, but the game is also massive, and every massive game has risk inherently. So it's going to be, all hands on deck to respond as people discover things, which they most certainly will. But the game is gone through quite a bit of QA, so we're hoping that it's a pretty solid experience when you guys first get a chance to touch it. I think that's gonna be about it for today. Booyan with an eye, how'd you think for your first stream?
It was awesome. I'm glad I had the chance to be here at last, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
I'm really glad too. I know when we first talked many years ago about you joining a stream, you're like, oh, I'm not sure. I think it was really fun to have you on. People enjoyed you a lot.
I am a bit camera shy, but it was a very pleasant experience. And Barat, you are particularly adept at this, so it helped a lot.
Well, the audience also loves it. I don't know if you can see chat right now. There's a lot of booyan. So they're super happy that you were able to join. Booyan with a Y, great to see you again as well. It's been a little while, my friend, but I'm sure everyone's glad to see you.
Well, at least nobody started me yet, but we'll see more of each other soon.
Yeah, I think more people were more excited that you were here, and I didn't see anyone asking where Pavel was. So I guess there's so much excitement around the Booyan Bros being on the stream that that absorbed.
We kept him in the trunk.
Pavel was here behind the camera doing funny faces to keep our spirits up.
he was trying to distract you during the stream. That's awesome. Oh, I love it. Oh man, you guys are great. Well, thank you so much. We're gonna see you guys all next week. The plan right now is to do a stream on Thursday. We will definitely let you know if that changes. And then of course Friday is the big day. We're gonna be here streaming for quite a while. We have some cool stuff in store on Friday, and it's gonna be hopefully a lot of fun. So everyone, thank you so much for all your support. It's only a short amount of time before you get to play and enjoy or judge or both. But we're really it's been a pleasure going through this journey with everybody. Thanks everyone. Have a safe, great rest of your weekend, and we will see you for launch week next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.